Welcome to His Stories, the place where real men's truths finally get told. If you're new here, you're in good company. We don't sugarcoat anything here, and we don't hide from the hard conversations. Today's story is about family, betrayal, and what happens when the people you sacrifice everything for turn their backs on you in your darkest hour. But it's also about unexpected friendship, second chances, and learning that sometimes your real family isn't the one you were born into. This one's gonna hit you right in the soul. Let's dive in. A man's character isn't revealed by how he treats his family when times are good, but by how his family treats him when times are bad. My father used to say that while we sat on our front porch in Birmingham, watching the neighborhood kids play in the street. I never really understood what he meant until I was 68 years old, standing in my driveway at 3 a.m., watching 40 years of my life go up in smoke, while my only son told me I couldn't stay in his guest room. That's when I learned that blood doesn't always make you family, and family doesn't always share your blood. Sometimes the person who saves you is someone you helped when they had nothing, not someone you raised from birth. 2. Emotionally charged. Huck. The flames were still licking at what used to be my roof when my son Tyler pulled up in his BMW, stepped out in his $1,000 suit, and told me I couldn't stay with him. Dad. I'm sorry about the house, he said, not even looking at the inferno that was consuming everything I owned. But Jessica and I can't have you staying with us. We've got the kids to think about and our routine, and frankly, we just don't have the space. I stood there in my pajamas in a borrowed fire department jacket, watching 40 years of memories burn to ash, and listened to my 35-year-old son, the boy I'd worked 3 jobs to put through college, the boy I'd sacrificed my marriage for, the boy I'd given everything to, explain why helping his homeless father would be inconvenient. Tyler, I said, my voice as steady as I could manage, I raised you better than this. This isn't about how you raised me, Dad. This is about being practical. Maybe it's time you looked into senior living facilities. I can help you research some options. Senior living facilities. 24 hours earlier, I'd been a homeowner, a man with dignity and independence. Now my own flesh and blood was trying to warehouse me like I was some burden to be managed. If you've ever been abandoned by the people you loved most when you needed them most, hit subscribe and drop your city in the comments. Where you watching from? Let's see where our brotherhood stretches, because what happened next changed everything I thought I knew about family, loyalty, and the power of true friendship. I was born Joshua Abraham in 1956 in Birmingham, Alabama, the second of 4 children to Samuel and Ruth Abraham. My daddy worked at the steel mill during the week and preached at our little Baptist church on Sundays, while my mama cleaned houses for white families on the south side of town and somehow still managed to have dinner on our table every night at 6 o'clock sharp. We lived in a shotgun house on 47th Street where the walls were thin but the love was thick. That house had 3 bedrooms for 6 people. 1 bathroom with a door that never quite closed right, and a kitchen so small that Mama had to cook in shifts when she was making Sunday dinner for the whole family. Joshua, Mama would say while stirring a pot of greens with one hand and checking cornbread with the other, you remember this. We might not have much, but we've got each other. Family takes care of family, no matter what. Those words lived in my heart like gospel truth. When my little sister Sarah got sick with pneumonia and the doctor bills piled up like snow in winter, our whole family worked extra to pay them off. When my older brother James lost his job at the factory, he moved back home until he found work again, and nobody complained about the crowded conditions. When our neighbor Mrs. Washington's husband died and she couldn't afford groceries, Mama would accidentally cook too much food and send me over with a plate. We help people because it's right, Daddy would tell me, not because we expect something back. But you watch, son. The kindness you put out into the world has a way of coming back to you when you need it most. I believed him then, and even after everything that happened, I still believe him now. School was my escape and my challenge all rolled into one. I was good with numbers, could read faster than most kids my age, and had a curiosity about how things worked that drove my teachers crazy with questions. But being smart and black in Birmingham in the thousands, 960S and early 70S, meant walking a tightrope every single day. "You've got a gift, Joshua," my 8th grade teacher, Mrs. Coleman, told me after school one day. "But gifts come with responsibility. You could be the first person in your family to go to college if you keep working hard." College seemed like something that happened to other people, people with money and connections and lighter skin. But Mrs. Coleman helped me apply for scholarships, stayed after school to tutor me in advanced math, and even drove to our house to convince my parents that I should take the SAT. "That boy's got a bright mind," she told Mama and Daddy, sitting in our tiny living room with her hands folded in her lap. "With the right education, he could be an engineer, an accountant, maybe even a lawyer. Don't let him waste that gift working in the mills." My parents looked at each other across our secondhand coffee table, having a conversation without words, the way married couples do after 20 years together. "How much is this college going to cost?" Daddy asked finally. "More than we have," Mrs. Coleman said honestly. "But there are scholarships for students like Joshua, academic scholarships, need-based aid programs specifically for bright Black students who want to study business or engineering." That's how I ended up at Alabama A&M University in 1974, the first Abraham to set foot on a college campus. I studied business administration with a minor in accounting, worked in the cafeteria 20 hours a week to help pay for books, and called home every Sunday to check on the family. "How are your grades, son?" Daddy would ask during our weekly phone calls. "Dean's List again this semester." "That's my boy. You make us proud, Joshua. You're going to have opportunities we never dreamed of." He was right. After graduation in 1978, I got a job with Anderson & Associates, a mid-sized accounting firm in Atlanta that was actively recruiting Black professionals as part of their diversity initiative. It wasn't charity. I was good at what I did, maybe better than most of the white guys they'd hire from more prestigious schools. But I knew the opportunity was partly because the firm needed to show they were progressive and inclusive. "I don't care why they hired me," I told my roommate Carlton one evening as we celebrated my job offer. "I'm going to work so hard they'll forget I was a diversity hire and remember I was the best hire they ever made." And I did work hard. 60-hour weeks were normal, 70-hour weeks were common during tax season, and I took every difficult client and challenging project they'd give me. Within 3 years, I was handling some of their biggest accounts. Within 5 years, I was promoted to senior associate. Within 10 years, I was making more money than my daddy had ever dreamed of. That's when I met Rachel. She was working as a paralegal at the law firm across the street from our office building. A beautiful blonde woman from Savannah with green eyes and a smile that could light up a room. We met in the elevator of the building where we both worked, during one of those awkward moments when the elevator gets stuck between floors and strangers become temporary companions. "This is just perfect," she said, checking her watch as we waited for the maintenance crew. "I'm supposed to be in court in 20 minutes. "What kind of case?" I asked, trying to make conversation. "Divorce proceeding. Husband trying to hide assets from his wife. Wife trying to prove he's been embezzling from his own company. The usual mess." "Sounds complicated." "Everything's complicated when money's involved. People will do anything to protect their bank accounts, even if it means destroying their families." She had no idea how prophetic those words would turn out to be. We started talking regularly after that, meeting for coffee before work, having lunch when our schedules aligned, eventually progressing to dinner dates and weekend activities. Rachel was smart, funny, ambitious, and completely different from any woman I'd ever dated. "My family's going to have opinions about you," she warned me after we'd been seeing each other for about 6 months. "What kind of opinions?" "The kind that come from growing up in rural Georgia in the 1950s and 60s. They're not bad people, but they have traditional views." I understood what she meant. We were living in 1985, but interracial relationships were still controversial in many parts of the South. Some people were progressive and accepting, others were hostile and prejudiced, and most fell somewhere in between. "What about you?" I asked. "What are your opinions?" "I think you're the smartest, kindest, most hardworking man I've ever met," she said. "And I think I'm falling in love with you." We got married in 1986 in a small ceremony that was attended by my entire family and exactly 3 members of hers. her sister Janet, her cousin Michael, and her grandmother, who was 89 years old, and announced that she didn't care what color I was, as long as I treated Rachel right. "You take care of our girl," her grandmother told me at the reception, gripping my hand with surprising strength. "Love her, protect her, and don't let the world make you bitter." "Yes, ma'am," I said. "I promise." And I kept that promise, even when keeping it cost me more than I'd ever imagined. Rachel and I bought a house in a good neighborhood in Atlanta, a 3-bedroom ranch with a big backyard and excellent schools nearby. We were planning for the future, talking about kids and careers and all the dreams that young married couples share. Tyler was born in 1989, a perfect little boy who looked like his mama, but had my stubborn streak. I held him in the hospital room, this tiny person who was half of me and half of the woman I loved, and swore that I would give him everything I'd never had. "He's going to have every opportunity," I told Rachel as we looked down at our sleeping son. "The best schools, college tuition already saved, a father who's there for every game and every graduation." "Don't spoil him," Rachel laughed. "We want him to be grateful and hardworking, not entitled and lazy." "Trust me," I said, "this boy's going to know the value of work and family." For the first few years of Tyler's life, we were happy. I was advancing at the accounting firm. Rachel had started her own paralegal consulting business, and we had enough money to live comfortably while still saving for Tyler's future. We took family vacations, had barbecues in our backyard, and felt like we were living the American dream. But dreams have a way of turning into nightmares when you're not paying attention. The problem started small. Rachel began complaining that I worked too much, that I was never home, that Tyler barely knew his father because I was always at the office or traveling for clients. "I didn't marry a stranger," she said during one of our increasingly frequent arguments. "I married a man who made time for me. Now I feel like I'm raising Tyler alone." She wasn't wrong. I was working 70-hour weeks regularly, traveling at least twice a month, and bringing work home on weekends. But I was doing it for them, for our future, for Tyler's college fund and our retirement and the security that came with financial success. "This is temporary," I kept telling her. "Once I make partner, I'll be able to delegate more, work fewer hours, spend more time at home." "You've been saying that for 3 years, Joshua. Tyler's growing up without his father." The arguments got worse. Rachel started making comments about my priorities, about how I cared more about money than family, about how I was becoming someone she didn't recognize. And Tyler, caught in the middle, started acting out at school and becoming more distant at home. "Maybe we should try counseling," I suggested after a particularly bad fight. "Maybe you should try being present in your own life," Rachel shot back. The marriage limped along for another 2 years, held together by our shared love for Tyler and our mutual reluctance to admit failure. But in 1995, when Tyler was 6 years old, Rachel finally had enough. "I want a divorce," she said one evening after Tyler had gone to bed. "I can't do this anymore, Joshua. I can't be married to someone who's never here. I'm here now." "No, you're not. Your body is here, but your mind is at the office. You've missed more school events than you've attended. You work through dinner more nights than not. Tyler asked me why Daddy doesn't love him enough to come to his baseball games." That last part hit me like a punch to the stomach. I love Tyler more than anything in the world. Then start acting like it. But not with me. I'm done. The divorce was finalized in 1996. Rachel got primary custody of Tyler. I got him on weekends and holidays, and we split our assets down the middle. The house we'd bought together got sold, and I moved into a smaller place closer to downtown, while Rachel and Tyler stayed in the suburb. "This doesn't change anything between us," I told Tyler during one of our first weekend visits in my new apartment. "I'm still your daddy, and I love you just as much as I always have." "Then why don't you live with us anymore?" he asked, and I realized that explaining adult relationships to a 7-year-old was harder than any business negotiation I'd ever handled. Sometimes grown-ups can't live together anymore, but that doesn't mean they stop loving their children. No matter what happens, you will always be the most important thing in my life. I meant every word. And for the next 15 years, I tried to prove it by being the best weekend father I could possibly be. I went to every game, every school play, every parent-teacher conference. I paid for private schools, summer camps, tutoring, college prep courses, and anything else Tyler needed or wanted. When Tyler decided he wanted to play travel baseball, I paid the fees and drove him to tournaments every weekend. When he wanted to learn guitar, I bought him a professional instrument and paid for private lessons. When he got accepted to Duke University, I wrote a check for the full tuition without blinking. "You're spoiling him," Rachel warned me during one of our co-parenting conversations. "He's starting to think money solves everything." "I'm giving him opportunities," I countered. "I'm making sure he never has to struggle the way I did." "There's a difference between providing opportunities and buying love, Joshua." Maybe she was right, but Tyler was my only child, my legacy, the person I was working so hard to provide for. If I couldn't be there every day, at least I could make sure he had everything he needed to succeed. By the time Tyler graduated from Duke in 2011 with a degree in business administration, I'd spent over $300,000, 0 cents, on his education alone. When he got married to Jessica in 2014, I paid for the wedding, a $50,000, 0 cents affair that made Rachel uncomfortable but made Tyler happy. When they bought their first house in 2016, I co-signed the mortgage and helped with the down payment. "Dad, you don't have to do all this," Tyler said when I handed him the check for the house. "I want to," I said. "I want you to have everything I never had." "What you never had was a father who was around," he said, and there was an edge to his voice that I'd never heard before. "Money can't replace time, Dad." His words stung, but I pushed the feeling aside. Tyler was successful, married, financially stable, and starting a family of his own. That's all any father could ask for, right? I thought I'd done everything right. I thought I'd been a good father, even if I hadn't been a good husband. I thought that love and sacrifice and financial support would be enough to ensure that my son would always be there for me the way I'd always been there for him. I was wrong about a lot of things, but I was about to learn the most painful lesson of all. Sometimes the people you sacrifice everything for are the first ones to abandon you when you need them most. 4. The relationship/bond. The years after Tyler's graduation from Duke were some of the best of my life. Or at least that's what I told myself. My son was building a successful career in marketing, married to a lovely woman who seemed to genuinely care about him, and living the kind of stable, comfortable life I'd worked so hard to make possible. Tyler and Jessica's wedding in 2014 was everything a father could hope for. I walked him down the aisle since Rachel had remarried and her new husband David was handling the father of the bride duties. Seeing Tyler in his tuxedo, standing tall and confident, I felt like every sacrifice had been worth it. "I'm proud of you, son," I told him during our father-son dance at the reception. "You've become an incredible man. Thanks to you, Dad. I know I don't say it enough, but I appreciate everything you've done for me." Those were the words I'd been waiting to hear for 25 years. Jessica fit into our family seamlessly. She was warm, intelligent, and seemed to genuinely appreciate the close relationship Tyler and I had developed. During family dinners, she'd ask about my work, my travels, and my plans for retirement, with what seemed like real interest. "Mr. Abraham," she said during one of our early conversations, "Tyler tells me you worked your way up from nothing to become one of the most successful accountants in Atlanta. That's really inspiring." "Please call me Joshua, and thank you, but I just worked hard and got lucky with some good opportunities." "Luck is what happens when preparation meets opportunity," she said, quoting one of my favorite sayings back to me. Tyler says you used to tell him that all the time when he was growing up. It touched me that Tyler had remembered and shared those conversations with his wife. Maybe I'd done better as a father than I'd given myself credit for. When Tyler and Jessica bought their house in 2016, I was thrilled to help with the down payment. It was a beautiful 4-bedroom colonial in an excellent school district, perfect for the family they were planning to start. "Dad, this is too much," Tyler protested when I handed him the check for $40,000, 0 cents. "It's an investment in your future," I said. "Your kids are going to grow up in this house, and I want them to have the stability I never had." We could have managed the down payment ourselves eventually. I know you could have. But why struggle when I can help? This is what family does. That phrase, "this is what family does," became something of a motto for me during those years. When Tyler's marketing firm was going through layoffs and he was worried about job security, I offered to float him some money to cover his mortgage until things stabilized. When Jessica wanted to go back to school for her master's degree, I offered to pay the tuition. When they needed new furniture for the house, I insisted on buying it as a housewarming gift. "You're too generous, Joshua," Jessica said after I'd had a dining room set delivered to their house. "We don't want to take advantage of your kindness." "You're not taking advantage, you're family. And family takes care of family." Their first child, my grandson Benjamin, was born in 2017. Holding that tiny boy in a hospital, seeing Tyler's face light up with the same wonder and terror I'd felt 28 years earlier, I knew I was witnessing the continuation of our family legacy. "He's perfect," I whispered, rocking Benjamin while Tyler and Jessica rested. "He looks like Tyler did when he was born," Jessica said from her hospital bed. "Same nose, same stubborn chin." "Abraham, genes are strong," I laughed. "This boy is going to be a force to be reckoned with." I immediately opened a college savings account for Benjamin, depositing $25,000, 0 cents, as a starting fund. When Tyler protested that it was too much, I reminded him that college costs were increasing every year and it was never too early to start planning. "I want Benjamin to have every opportunity," I said. "No student loans, no financial stress, just the freedom to pursue his dreams." "Like you gave me," Tyler said, and I could hear genuine gratitude in his voice. Their second child, my granddaughter Sophie, was born in 2019. She was a beautiful little girl with Jessica's blonde hair and Tyler's serious expression, and I fell in love with her immediately. I opened another college account, bought them a minivan to accommodate the growing family, and helped Tyler convert their basement into a proper playroom. "Dad, you're spoiling us," Tyler said as we assembled playground equipment in his backyard. "That's what grandfathers are for," I said. "Besides, I missed too much of your childhood because I was working all the time. I don't want to miss any of theirs." And I didn't miss anything, at least not intentionally. I was at every birthday party, every holiday celebration, every family barbecue. When Tyler and Jessica needed babysitters, I was always available. When they wanted to take a weekend trip, I'd watch the kids gladly. "You're the best grandfather ever," Sophie told me one evening while I was reading her a bedtime story. "And you're the best granddaughter ever," I replied, tucking her into bed. "Are you going to live forever, Grandpa?" The question caught me off guard. "Why do you ask that, sweetheart?" "'Cause I want you to always be here. Promise you'll always be here." "I promise I'll be here as long as I possibly can," I said. And I meant it with every fiber of my being. During those years, I felt like I'd finally gotten the family relationships right. Yes, Rachel and I had divorced, but we'd managed to co-parent successfully and maintain a friendly relationship. Tyler was thriving professionally and personally. My grandchildren were healthy and happy. I was involved in their lives without being intrusive, helpful without being controlling. Or so I thought. Looking back now, I can see the subtle changes that started happening around 2020. Tyler became less communicative, returning my calls a day or two later instead of immediately. Family dinners became less frequent, with Tyler citing work pressures and the kids' busy schedules. When I offered to help with expenses or projects around their house, Tyler would hesitate before accepting, like he was doing me a favor rather than the other way around. "Is everything okay?" I asked him during one of our phone conversations. "You seem stressed lately." "Just work stuff, Dad. The marketing business is getting more competitive and I'm putting in longer hours trying to keep my clients happy. If money's tight, you know I can help." "We're fine. Jessica's doing well with her freelance writing and my commissions have been decent. We don't need help right now." The phrase "right now" bothered me more than it should have. It implied that help might be needed later, but also that it wasn't automatically assumed. For 30 years, I'd been Tyler's financial safety net, and suddenly he was talking like that might change. I told myself I was being paranoid. Tyler was a grown man with his own family and responsibilities. It was natural for him to want more independence, to prove he could succeed without his father's help. That's what I'd raised him to do, wasn't it? But the distance continued to grow. Christmas 2021 felt different. Still warm and loving, but somehow more formal. Tyler and Jessica were gracious hosts. The kids were excited about their presents, but there was an undercurrent of tension I couldn't quite identify. "Dad," Tyler said as I was getting ready to leave after Christmas dinner, "can we talk for a minute?" "Of course. What's on your mind?" "Jessica and I have been discussing our finances, and we think it's time we became more independent. We're doing well enough now that we don't need the kind of help you've been giving us." "What kind of help?" Picking up restaurant bills, buying things for the kids, offering to pay for repairs around the house. "We appreciate everything you've done, but we want to stand on our own feet." Standing on their own feet. It sounded reasonable, even admirable, but it also felt like they were pushing me away, creating distance where there had always been closeness. "Tyler, I don't help because I think you need it. I help because I want to, because you're my family, and we'll always be your family. But we want our relationship to be based on more than just money." More than just money. The phrase hit me like a slap across the face. Had Tyler really thought our relationship was primarily financial? Had 30 years of love and sacrifice been reduced to a series of transactions? "Is that what you think?" I asked quietly, "that our relationship is about money?" "No, Dad, that's not what I mean. I just think it would be healthier if we weren't always depending on your generosity." "Healthier for whom?" I wanted to ask, but didn't. Instead, I nodded and told him I understood, even though I didn't understand at all. The following year, 2022, was the loneliest year of my life since my divorce. Tyler still called regularly, and we still had family dinners, but the dynamic had fundamentally changed. I was no longer the provider, the problem solver, the person they turned to when they needed help. I was just Tyler's father, welcome but not necessary. I tried to respect their wishes for independence, but it was harder than I'd expected. When I heard that their air conditioning had broken during a heat wave, my instinct was to call and offer to pay for repairs. Instead, I asked if they needed anything and accepted Tyler's answer that they had it handled. When Sophie mentioned that she wanted to take piano lessons, I bit my tongue instead of immediately offering to pay for them. When Tyler mentioned that he was considering looking for a new job, I offered emotional support instead of financial advice. "You're doing the right thing," my friend Robert told me during one of our weekly golf games. "Kids need to learn independence. You can't take care of them forever." "I know that intellectually," I said, "but emotionally, it feels like they're shutting me out." Maybe they're trying to prove something to themselves. Maybe they need to know they can succeed without your help. Maybe Robert was right. Maybe this was just a phase, a natural part of Tyler's development as a man and a father. Maybe once he'd proven to himself that he could provide for his family independently, our relationship would return to its previous closeness. I held on to that hope for 2 years through increasingly infrequent phone calls and shorter family visits. I told myself that Tyler was just busy, that he was focused on his career and his young children, that the distance was temporary. I was still telling myself that on the night my house burned down, when I realized that the son I'd sacrificed everything for couldn't find room in his life to help his father in his darkest hour. The signs that Tyler was pulling away from me didn't happen overnight. They accumulated slowly, like dust settling on furniture you don't notice until the sunlight hits it just right. Looking back now, I can trace the beginning of the end to late 2021, about 6 months after I'd helped them with their basement renovation. It started with small things, phone calls that went to voicemail more often than they were answered, Tyler forgetting to invite me to Benjamin's soccer games until the last minute, almost like he was hoping I wouldn't be able to make it. Jessica being polite but distant during family gatherings, like she was performing the role of dutiful daughter-in-law rather than genuinely enjoying my company. "How's work going, Jessica?" I asked during Sunday dinner at their house in February 2022. Fine, she said, not looking up from cutting Sophie's chicken. Busy. Still doing freelance writing? Mostly. It was like pulling teeth to get more than one-word answers from her. This was the same woman who used to ask me about my travels, my clients, my plans for retirement. Now she acted like conversation with me was a chore to be endured. Jessica seems stressed lately, I mentioned to Tyler as we cleaned up dishes after dinner. She's fine, just tired. The kids keep her busy during the day and she's been working on a big project for a new client. If money's tight, I could help out. Maybe she could cut back on work and spend more time with the kids. Dad, we talked about this. We're handling our own finances now. There was again that wall he'd erected between us. Every offer of help was met with polite but firm rejection. Every attempt to be involved in their lives was carefully managed and controlled. The next warning sign came in March, when I called to check on Benjamin after Tyler mentioned he'd been sick with the flu. "How's Benjamin feeling?" I asked when Tyler answered the phone. "He's better, back to school today." "It's good. I was thinking about stopping by this weekend to see him." "This weekend's not great, Dad. We've got plans." "What about next weekend?" "Let me check with Jessica and get back to you." He never got back to me. When I called the following week, he apologized and said they'd been swamped with activities. When I suggested the weekend after that, he said they were visiting Jessica's parents. It was becoming clear that I was no longer a priority in their lives. I was being managed, scheduled, fit in when convenient, rather than welcomed whenever I wanted to visit. "Maybe you're being too sensitive," my friend Robert suggested when I confided my concerns during our weekly golf game. "Young families are busy. They've got work, kids' activities, household responsibilities. It's not personal." "It feels personal," I said. "It feels like they're trying to create distance." "Have you asked Tyler directly if there's a problem?" I hadn't because I was afraid of the answer. What if Tyler confirmed my suspicions? What if he told me that he wanted less contact, that my presence in their lives had become burdensome? The warning signs became more obvious during the summer of 2022. Tyler's birthday passed with a perfunctory dinner at a restaurant where I felt like an invited guest rather than the father of the birthday boy. Father's Day was celebrated with a card that looked like it had been picked up at the last minute and a gift card to a restaurant I'd never mentioned liking. "Thanks for the gift card," I told Tyler over the phone a few days later. "Welcome. Jessica picked it out." Jessica picked it out. Not Tyler, not the grandchildren, but Jessica. The woman who'd become increasingly cold and distant over the past year. The most telling incident happened in August, when I was driving past their neighborhood and decided to stop by for an impromptu visit. I'd done this dozens of times over the years, and it had always been welcomed. But when I rang the doorbell, Jessica answered with a look of surprise that quickly morphed into annoyance. "Oh, hi, Joshua. Tyler's not here." "That's okay. I thought I'd say hello to the kids." "They're nappy." "I can wait until they wake up. Actually, we've got plans when they get up. Maybe you could call next time before stopping by?" All before stopping by. I was being asked to make appointments to see my own grandchildren. This from the woman whose house I'd helped buy, whose children I'd supported since birth, whose family I'd considered my own for 8 years. "Of course," I said, trying to keep the hurt out of my voice. "I'll call next time." As I walked back to my car, I heard voices from their backyard. The kids weren't napping. They were playing in the pool while Tyler grilled hamburgers. Jessica had lied to get rid of me. That night, I called Tyler directly. "Son, did I do something wrong?" Jessica seemed uncomfortable when I stopped by today. "You didn't do anything wrong, Dad. But Jessica and I have talked, and we think it would be better if you called before visiting. We're trying to establish routines with the kids, and unexpected visits can disrupt that." "Since when do I disrupt anything? I've been helping with those kids since they were born, and we appreciate that. But they're getting older now, and we want them to understand boundaries and schedules." Boundaries and schedules. Code words for keep your distance. "Tyler, what's really going on here? You and Jessica have been treating me like a stranger for months." "That's not true, Dad. We're just busy and we're trying to give our family some space to develop our own traditions." Our own traditions. As if I wasn't family, as if I was some outside influence to be managed, rather than the grandfather who'd been present for every important moment of their lives. The final warning sign came in October when Sophie had her 5th birthday party. In previous years, I'd been involved in planning the celebration, helping to decorate, buying elaborate presents. This year, I received a text message 3 days before the party. Sophie's birthday is Saturday at 2 p.m. Hope you can make it. Hope you can make it. Like I was a distant relative or a family friend rather than the grandfather who'd never missed a birthday. I arrived at the party to find Jessica's entire extended family there. Parents, siblings, cousins, family friends I'd never met. I was the only representative from Tyler's side of the family, and I felt like an outsider in my own son's home. "Grandpa!" Sophie ran up to me with genuine excitement. "You came!" "Of course I came, sweetheart. I wouldn't miss your birthday." "Did you bring me a present?" "I sure did." I handed her the carefully wrapped package I'd spent weeks selecting. A beautiful dollhouse with furniture and tiny people. "Wow, it's perfect. Thank you, Grandpa." At least the grandchildren still seemed happy to see me. It was only the adults who were treating me like an unwelcome intrusion. During the party, I overheard a conversation between Jessica and her sister that made my blood run cold. "How's Tyler's dad doing?" the sister asked. "He's fine, I guess. Still pretty involved. Maybe too involved, if you ask me." "What do you?" "He's always been very generous, but sometimes it feels like he's trying to buy his way into our lives. Tyler feels guilty saying no to him because of everything he's done for us financially." That's tough. That's hard when family relationships get complicated by money. Exactly. We're trying to establish some boundaries, but it's difficult when he's been so helpful over the years, trying to buy his way into our lives. The words hit me like a physical blow. Was that really how Jessica saw our relationship? Was that how Tyler saw it too? I left the party early, claiming I had a headache, but really I just couldn't stand being there anymore. The children hugged me goodbye with genuine affection, but Tyler's farewell felt perfunctory, like he was checking off a social obligation. "Thanks for coming, Dad. Sophie loved the dollhouse." "You're welcome. She's a special little girl." "She is. We'll talk soon, okay?" But we didn't talk soon. Days stretched into weeks with no contact except for brief text messages. When I called, Tyler was always busy, always rushing to get somewhere, always promising to call back later, but never quite finding the time. I spent the holidays of 2022 alone for the first time in decades. Tyler invited me to Christmas dinner, but the invitation felt obligatory rather than heartfelt. I could see Jessica checking her watch during dinner, clearly wanting the evening to end. The children were excited about their presents, but Tyler and Jessica seemed to regard my gifts as excessive, burdensome, inappropriate. "Dad, you really didn't need to spend this much," Tyler said quietly as the kids played with their new toys. "I wanted to. They're my grandchildren. But it makes us uncomfortable when you spend so much money. It feels like you're trying to compete with Jessica's parents or something." Compete with Jessica's parents? I wasn't trying to compete with anyone. I was trying to love my grandchildren the way I'd always loved Tyler. Generously, unconditionally, without reservation. But I was beginning to understand that my love was being interpreted as manipulation, my generosity as control, my desire to be involved as intrusion. "I'm sorry if I've made you uncomfortable," I said. "That was never my intention." "I know, wasn't. But maybe we need to recalibrate our relationship. Find a balance that works for everyone. A balance that works for everyone. Translation, less involvement from me, more distance, fewer expectations of family closeness." I agreed to try, but my heart was breaking. The son I'd sacrificed everything for was essentially telling me that my presence in his life needed to be reduced, managed, controlled. New Year's Eve 2022 found me sitting alone in my house, thinking about the year that had passed and wondering what the future held. I'd lost my connection to Tyler's family, the most important relationship in my life. I felt like a stranger in my own son's world. Maybe it's time to accept that Tyler's grown up and moved on, I told myself. Maybe this is what normal families look like when children become adults. But it didn't feel normal. It felt like rejection, like all my years of love and sacrifice had been reduced to a financial transaction that Tyler was now trying to escape. I should have seen what was coming. I should have recognized that the distance Tyler was creating would become a chasm when I really needed him. But I was still in denial, still hoping that our relationship could be repaired, still believing that blood was thicker than water and family would always come through in a crisis. I was wrong about all of that, but I was about to learn just how wrong when everything I owned went up in smoke and the son I'd given everything to told me I had nowhere to stay. 6. The betrayal. The fire started at 2:47 a.m. on a Tuesday in March 2024. I know the exact time because that's when the smoke detector in my hallway started screaming, jerking me out of the deepest sleep I'd had in weeks. At first, I thought it was a malfunction. The detector had been acting up lately, going off when I burned toast or took too long a shower. But when I stumbled out of bed and opened my bedroom door, I was hit with a wall of heat and smoke that sent me stumbling backward. My house was on fire. And the next few minutes were a blur of panic and survival instinct. I crawled low to avoid the smoke, grabbed my phone and wallet from the nightstand, and barely made it out through the front door before the flames reached the living room. By the time I was standing on my front lawn in my pajamas, the fire had consumed half of my house. I called 911 with shaking hands, watching 40 years of my life disappear into orange flames and black smoke. Photo albums from Tyler's childhood, furniture I'd bought when Rachel and I were married, books I'd collected over decades, the desk where I'd done homework with Tyler every night after his mother and I divorced, all of it turning to ash. The fire department arrived within 10 minutes, but they were fighting a losing battle. The flames had spread too far, too fast. All they could do was keep the fire from spreading to neighboring houses and let my home burn to the ground. "I'm sorry, sir," the fire chief told me as we watched the roof collapse. "The structure's a total loss. Is there anyone you can call to come get you?" "Tyler." I needed to call Tyler. "Dad?" His voice was groggy when he answered on the fourth ring. "What's wrong? It's almost 4 a.m. "Tyler, my house is on fire. Everything's gone." "What, are you okay? Are you hurt?" "I'm fine, but the house is destroyed. I need somewhere to stay tonight." "Oh God, Dad, I'm so sorry. Let me get dressed and I'll be right there." For the first time in months, Tyler sounded like my son again. Concerned, caring, ready to help. Maybe this crisis would bring us back together, I thought. Maybe family really did matter when things got serious. Tyler arrived 20 minutes later, pulling up just as the fire trucks were beginning to pack up their equipment. He jumped out of his BMW and hurried over to where I was standing with a paramedic who was checking me for smoke inhalation. "Dad, thank God you're okay," he said, putting his arm around my shoulders. "What happened?" "I don't know yet. I woke up to smoke alarms, and by the time I got out of my bedroom, the whole house was engulfed." "Jesus, you could die." "But I didn't. I'm alive, just homeless." Tyler looked at the smoldering remains of my house, then back at me in my borrowed fire department jacket and pajama pants. For a moment, I saw something in his face that looked like the old Tyler, the son who used to call me when he had problems, who used to turn to me for help and advice. "We need to get you somewhere warm," he said. "And we need to start making phone calls, insurance, police report, maybe a hotel for tonight. I was hoping I could stay with you and Jessica just until I figure out what to do next." That's when everything changed. Tyler's expression shifted almost imperceptibly, like a door closing. The concerned son disappeared, replaced by the distant, careful man he'd become over the past year. That's complicated." "Complicated? Jessica and I, we've got routines with the kids, we've got work schedules, and frankly, we just don't have the space." I stared at him, trying to process what I was hearing. My house had just burned down. I was standing in my pajamas at 4 a.m., surrounded by the ashes of everything I owned, and my son was telling me that helping his homeless father would be inconvenient. "Tyler, I don't need much, just a couch or even a sleeping bag on the floor. I'll be quiet, I won't get in the way." "It's not about noise or getting in the way. It's about, Look, Dad, Jessica and I have been working really hard to establish boundaries in our lives. Having you stay with us, even temporarily, would complicate things. Boundaries. There was that word again. The same word he'd been using for months to keep me at arm's length. Son, my house just burned down. This is an emergency. I know, and I'm sorry about that. But maybe this is an opportunity for you to think about senior living options. You're 68 years old, living alone in a big house. Maybe it's time to consider something more manageable. Senior living options. He was talking about putting me in a nursing home while I stood in the ashes of my life. Tyler, I don't need senior living. I need my family. We are your family, Dad, but we also have responsibilities to our immediate family. Jessica's pregnant again, and we're trying to keep stress to a minimum. Jessica was pregnant. This was the first I was hearing about it, and Tyler was using it as an excuse to abandon his father in his hour of need. Congratulations, I said, my voice flat. When were you planning to tell me? We were going to call you this weekend. We're still early, and Jessica wants to wait until the second trimester before telling people. But you telling me now because it's convenient for your argument. That's not fair, Dad. What's not fair is my son telling me I can't stay in his house after mine just burned down. Tyler ran his hands through his hair, looking around at the fire trucks and neighbors who had gathered to watch the commotion. I could see him calculating, weighing his options, looking for a way out of this conversation. Look, Dad, I'll help you find a hotel for tonight. Tomorrow we can start looking at insurance claims, temporary housing options, maybe some assisted living facilities. That might be a good fit. Assisted living facilities. You're not getting any younger, and this fire's proof that living alone might not be the safest option anymore. And I felt something break inside my chest. Something that had been cracking for months, finally shattering completely. This wasn't about safety or practicality or Jessica's pregnancy. This was about Tyler wanting me out of his life. And the fire had given him the perfect excuse to make it happen. I raised you better than this, I said quietly. This isn't about how you raised me, Dad. This is about being practical. Maybe it's time you look into senior living facilities anyway. I can help you research some options, find something nice. Senior living facilities. The phrase kept coming up, like a broken record. Tyler had clearly been thinking about this long before tonight, waiting for the right moment to suggest that his aging father be warehoused somewhere convenient. You want to put me in a home? I want to make sure you're safe and comfortable. There are some really nice places now with activities and social opportunities and medical care on site. What I want is to be with my family when I need them most. Dad, you're being unreasonable. We have 2 small children, a third on the way, demanding careers, a mortgage to pay. We can't just drop everything and take care of you indefinitely. I'm not asking you to take care of me indefinitely. I'm asking you to let me sleep on your couch for a few nights while I figure out what to do next. And I'm telling you, that's not possible. The finality in his voice was unmistakable. Tyler had made his decision, probably before he'd even gotten dressed and driven over here. He'd come to survey the damage, offer token sympathy, and then find a polite way to make sure I understood that his life had no room for his homeless father. I see, I said. So what exactly are you offering? I'll pay for a hotel tonight and help you contact your insurance company tomorrow. I'll help you research housing options and maybe some senior communities that might be a good fit. But not a place to stay with my own family. Not right now. No, not right now. As if there might be some future moment when taking in his homeless father would be more convenient. I looked at Tyler standing there in his expensive clothes next to his luxury car, this man I'd sacrificed everything for, this person I'd put through college and graduate school and helped with every major purchase of his adult life. The son I'd loved unconditionally was telling me that loving me back was too complicated for his schedule. I understand, I said finally. Dad, I know you're upset, but this is the right thing to do. You'll see that once you've had time to think about it. The right thing to do. Tyler actually believed he was doing the right thing by abandoning his father. Jessica had trained him well. Can you at least recommend a hotel? There's a Hampton Inn about 10 minutes from here. I'll drive you over and get you checked in. Don't bother. I'll call a cab. Dad, don't be like this. Like what? Like a father who expected his son to help him in an emergency? You're being dramatic. I am helping you. I'm just helping in a practical way. Practical. Everything with Tyler had become about being practical, being reasonable, being sensible. There was no room for love or loyalty or family obligation in this practical world. The fire chief approached us, interrupting our conversation. Mr. Abraham, we finished our initial assessment. The house is a total loss, but we've secured the scene. You'll need to contact your insurance company, and we'll have a full report ready by tomorrow afternoon. Thank you, I said. Is there anything we can do to help you tonight? Somewhere you need to go? I looked at Tyler, giving him one last chance to do the right thing, but his expression hadn't changed. He was already planning his exit strategy, already mentally rehearsing how he'd explain this to Jessica. I'll figure something out, I told the fire chief. Dad, Tyler said as the fire chief walked away, let me at least drive you to the hotel. I said I'll figure something out. Don't be stubborn about this. I'm trying to help. No, you're trying to manage me. There's a difference. Tyler sighed heavily, like I was being an unreasonable child rather than a homeless father. Fine. I'll call you tomorrow to check on you. Will you? Of course I will. We're family, Dad. Just because we can't have you stay with us doesn't mean we don't care about you. We're family. The words sounded hollow coming from someone who just proved that family meant nothing when it became inconvenient. Tyler walked back to his car, pausing at the driver's door. Dad, I know you're angry right now, but someday you'll understand that I'm doing what's best for everyone. What's best for everyone. Tyler had convinced himself that abandoning his father was some kind of noble sacrifice for the greater good. I watched him drive away, standing alone in my pajamas and borrowed jacket while my house smoldered behind me. Neighbors who'd come out to watch the fire were starting to drift back to their homes, the excitement over. The fire trucks were gone, the paramedics were gone, and now my son was gone too. I was 68 years old, homeless, and completely alone. That's when I remembered the business card in my wallet, the one I'd been carrying for 16 years without ever thinking I'd need to use it. The card belonged to William Harrison, a man who'd once been nothing more than a struggling kid from the wrong side of town, but who was now one of the richest men in America. And 16 years ago, when William had nothing and no one believed in him, I'd been the one person who'd given him a chance. Maybe it was time to see if kindness really did come back to you when you needed it most. 7. The aftermath and reckoning. The Hampton Inn desk clerk looked at me with a mixture of sympathy and concern when I walked into the lobby at 5:30 a.m., still wearing my pajamas under the fire department jacket and carrying nothing but my wallet and phone. Sir, are you all right? She asked, her voice gentle but professional. I need a room. My house burned down tonight and I don't have anywhere else to go. Oh my goodness, I'm so sorry. Of course we can help you. Let me see what we have available. The room cost $129, 0 cents for the night. Money I charged to a credit card while trying not to think about how long my savings would last if Tyler was serious about warehousing me in a senior living facility. The clerk, whose name tag read Amanda, was kind enough to find me some complimentary toiletries and a clean t-shirt from the hotel's Lost and Found. Is there anything else you need, Mr. Abraham? Someone I can call for you? Thank you, but I think I'm all set. I wasn't all set, of course. I was homeless, heartbroken, and beginning to understand that the son I devoted my life to had been planning to discard me long before my house burned down. The fire had just given him the excuse he'd been looking for. I sat on the edge of the hotel bed, staring at my phone and trying to decide what to do next. I could call my insurance company, but that would have to wait until business hours. I could call a few more hotels and find somewhere cheaper to stay, but that would just be delaying the inevitable conversation about long-term housing. Or I could call William Harrison. I pulled out my wallet and found the business card he'd given me 16 years ago. It was worn and faded, but still legible. William Harrison, Harrison Industries. If you ever need anything, call me day or night. William and I had met in 2008 during the financial crisis when half the businesses in Atlanta were struggling to survive. He was 28 years old then, trying to start a construction company with more ambition than capital, and I was handling the books for a small business loan program sponsored by the city. Most of the loan applications that came across my desk were from established businesses with collateral and credit histories. William's application was different. He was asking for $50,000, 0 cents, to start a construction company. But he had no assets, no business experience, and a credit score that most banks would have laughed at. "Mr. Abraham," he'd said during our interview, "I know my application doesn't look like much on paper, but I'm willing to work harder than anyone else you'll ever meet. I grew up in housing projects, but I learned construction work in summers with my uncle. I know I can make this business successful if someone just gives me a chance." Most of my colleagues thought William was a bad risk, young, inexperienced, undercapitalized, coming from a background that statistics said was unlikely to produce successful entrepreneurs. But something about his determination reminded me of myself at that age. Hungry, hardworking, and desperate for an opportunity to prove himself. But William, I told him, "I'm going to recommend your loan for approval, but I want you to understand something. This isn't charity. This is an investment in your potential. Don't make me regret it." "You won't regret it, sir. I promise you won't regret it." He was right. Within 2 years, William had paid back the loan and expanded his company to include residential and commercial projects. Within 5 years, he was bidding on major city contracts and employing dozens of workers. Within 10 years, Harrison Industries was one of the largest construction companies in the South. William never forgot who had given him his start. Every Christmas for the past 16 years, I'd received a card with a personal note thanking me for believing in him when no one else would. He'd invited me to his wedding, sent announcements when his children were born, and always ended his communications with the same phrase: "If you ever need anything, call me, day or night." I'd never taken him up on that offer. I'd been proud of my independence, confident in my ability to handle my own problems, but now, sitting in a hotel room with nothing but the clothes on my back and a son who'd made it clear I was no longer welcome in his life, I realized that pride might be a luxury I could no longer afford. It was almost 6 a.m., early even for a businessman, but William had always been an early riser. I took a deep breath and dialed the number on his card. He answered on the second ring. "William Harrison." "William, this is Joshua Abraham. I'm sorry to call so early, but I'm in a difficult situation and I remembered your offer." "Mr. Abraham, Joshua, my God, of course. Don't apologize for calling early. I've been up for an hour already. What's going on?" "My house burned down last night. Everything's gone. And I need help." "Jesus, Joshua, are you hurt? Are you safe?" "I'm safe, just homeless. I'm staying in a hotel tonight, but I need to figure out something more permanent." "Where are you right now?" I gave him the name and address of the hotel. "Stay put. I'm coming to get you." "William, you don't need to." "Like hell I don't. You gave me my start when nobody else would take a chance on me. Now it's my turn. I'll be there in 30 minutes. He hung up before I could protest further. I sat in the hotel room, watching the sun come up through the window, and tried to process what was happening. And one night, I discovered that my son considered me a burden to be managed, and that a man I'd helped 16 years ago was ready to drop everything to come to my aid. William arrived exactly 30 minutes later, knocking on my hotel room door with characteristic punctuality. When I opened it, I barely recognized the young man I'd met in 2008. He was 44 now, successful and confident, wearing an expensive suit that probably cost more than I'd spent on clothes in the past year. "Joshua," he said, pulling me into a bear hug. "I'm so sorry about your house. Are you really okay?" "I'm fine, just a little overwhelmed." "Of course you are. Anyone would be. Have you eaten anything?" "Not since yesterday. Then we're getting you fed first, and then we're figuring out what you need. Come on." William drove us to a 24-hour diner where he ordered enough food for 4 people and insisted I eat while he made phone calls. I listened to him arranging things, insurance adjusters, contractors to assess the fire damage, temporary housing options, even a personal shopper to buy me clothes since everything I owned had been destroyed. William, this is too much, I protested. I can handle some of this myself. When's the last time you dealt with a house fire, Josh? Never. I've handled insurance claims for dozens of clients over the years. I know who to call, what questions to ask, how to make sure you get everything you're entitled to. Let me help. I appreciate the offer, but I can't ask you to. You're not asking, I'm insistent. Joshua, do you remember what you told me when you approved my loan? Not exactly. You said that success creates an obligation to help others the way you've been helped. You gave me my start when I had nothing. Now I'm successful beyond anything I could have imagined, and you need help. This isn't charity. This is paying it forward. Over the next several hours, William transformed what had seemed like an insurmountable crisis into a manageable situation. He called his personal attorney to review my insurance policies and ensure I was getting proper representation. He arranged for a claims adjuster he trusted to assess the fire damage. He even had his assistant buy me a week's worth of clothes and toiletries while we handled the paperwork. Now, he said as we finished lunch, let's talk about where you're going to stay while the insurance gets sorted out. The hotel is fine for now. A hotel is not a home, and you're going to need stability while you deal with this. I've got a better idea. William explained that he owned several properties around Atlanta, including a furnished guest house on his estate that was currently vacant. It was completely self-contained. 2 bedrooms, full kitchen, living room, even a small office. And I could stay there as long as I needed. I can't accept that, I said. It's too generous. Why is it too generous? Because I can't afford to pay you market rate rent, and I won't accept charity. Who said anything about charity? You helped me when I needed it, and now I'm helping you when you need it. That's how friendship works. We barely know each other, William. I know that you took a chance on a poor kid with a dream when you could have played it safe and recommended someone with better credentials. I know that your decision changed my entire life, and I know that 16 years later, you're too proud to ask for help even when your house has burned down and you're sleeping in hotels. He had a point. I was being stubborn about accepting help from someone who genuinely wanted to provide it, while my own son had found excuses to avoid helping me when I needed it most. What about your family? Won't having me there be disruptive? The guest house is private, completely separate from the main house. My wife, Sarah, would love to meet you. I've told her about you many times over the years. Our kids are away at college, so it's just the 2 of us rattling around in a house that's too big anyway. I thought about Tyler's excuses. No space, routines with the children, Jessica's pregnancy, the need for boundaries. Here was William, a virtual stranger, offering me better accommodations than my own son would provide. All right, I said finally, but this is temporary, just until I can figure out my next steps. Stay as long as you need to, Joshua. There's no rush. That afternoon, William drove me to his estate in Buckhead, one of Atlanta's most exclusive neighborhoods. The property was stunning, a gated compound with a main house that looked like something from a magazine, and perfectly manicured grounds that stretched for acres. The guest house was larger and nicer than some homes I'd lived in. It was furnished with expensive but comfortable furniture, had a modern kitchen stocked with basic supplies, and felt more welcoming than the hotel where I'd spent the previous night. This is beautiful, William. Are you sure about this? Absolutely. Make yourself at home. If you need anything, the main house is just a phone call away. I need to call my son and let him know where I'm staying. Of course. Take all the time you need to get settled. After William left, I sat in the living room of the guest house and called Tyler. He answered on the 3rd ring, sounding distracted. Almost there. How you doing? Did you find a hotel? I did better than that. I'm staying with a friend. A friend? What friend? William Harrison? Do you remember me mentioning him over the years? The young man I helped get a business loan 16 years ago? Vaguely. Where are you staying exactly? I explained about the guest house, about William's generosity, about how he dropped everything to help me when he learned about the fire. Dad, that sounds generous, but are you sure it's a good idea? You barely know this person. I know him well enough, and he's been more helpful in the past 12 hours than my own family. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. It's not fair, Tyler said finally. I offered to help. I just couldn't offer what you wanted. What I wanted was a place to stay with my family while I figured out my next steps. What you offered was a hotel room and a brochure for senior living facilities. I offered what I could realistically provide. And William offered what he could realistically provide, which turned out to be a lot more. So you're going to stay there indefinitely? I'm going to stay there until I can rebuild my life, however long that takes. And then what? Are you planning to move back into a house by yourself? Dad, you're 68 years old. Last night proved that living alone might not be safe anymore. There it was again, Tyler's determination to use the fire as justification for putting me away somewhere convenient. William's 44 years old and he lives alone in a house twice the size of mine. Should he be in assisted living too? It's different. He's younger and he has staff and security systems, all of which can be arranged for me too, if that's really the issue. The issue is that you need to be realistic about your capabilities and your future needs. The issue is that you want me out of your life and using my age as an excuse. It's not true, Dad, isn't it? You've been creating distance between us for 2 years. You've made it clear that my presence in your family's life is burdensome. Last night just gave you the excuse you've been looking for to make that distance permanent. I don't want distance, Dad. I want boundaries. I want a relationship that's healthy for everyone involved. A relationship that's healthy for you, you mean? Yes, for me and my family. Is that wrong? It's wrong when it means abandoning your father in his time of need. Tyler sighed heavily. Dad, I can see we're not going to agree about this. I'm glad you found somewhere to stay. Call me if you need anything else. Will I hear from you, or is it my responsibility to maintain this relationship by myself? Of course you'll hear from me. I'll call you in a few days to check on you. A few days? Yes, a few days. I need some time to process everything that's happened. Time to process. Tyler needed time to process the fact that his homeless father had found help from someone other than his own family. After we hung up, I sat in William's beautiful guest house and thought about the conversation. Tyler wasn't relieved that I was safe and comfortable. He was annoyed that I'd found a solution that didn't require his help or approval. He wanted me dependent on his limited generosity, grateful for whatever scraps of attention he was willing to provide. But William had reminded me of something I'd forgotten. I deserve better than scraps. I deserve to be treated with dignity and respect, to have my independence respected, to be valued for who I was rather than managed like a problem to be solved. For the first time since the fire, I began to think that maybe this disaster was also an opportunity. Maybe it was time to stop depending on Tyler for validation and start building relationships with people who actually wanted me in their lives. Maybe it was time to find out what real family looked like. Living in William's guest house for the first few weeks after the fire was like stepping into a different world. Not just because of the luxury and comfort, but because of the way William and his wife Sarah treated me, like a welcome guest rather than a burden to be managed. Joshua, you've got to try Sarah's famous Sunday morning pancakes, William said during my first weekend there. She's been perfecting the recipe for 20 years. I don't want to impose on your family time, I said. Impose? Sarah's been excited to meet you since I told her you were staying here. She wants to thank you in person for giving me my start. Sarah Harrison was a warm, gracious woman who made me feel like an old friend rather than a charity case. Over breakfast that Sunday, she told me stories about William's early struggles that I'd never heard. He used to work 18-hour days, she said, refilling my coffee cup. 7 days a week for the first 2 years. I barely saw him, but he was so determined to prove that your faith in him was justified. I just saw potential, I said. William did all the hard work. You saw potential when nobody else would even look at his application, William corrected. My credit was shot. I had no collateral, And I was asking for money to start a business in an industry I'd never run before. You took a huge risk. It didn't feel like a risk. It felt like the right thing to do. That's because you have good instincts about people, Sarah said. Williams told me that story 100 times, and it always comes back to the same thing. You believed in him when he didn't even believe in himself. Their gratitude was genuine and touching, but also confusing. I'd done my job, followed my instincts, and helped a young man get a loan. It hadn't felt particularly noble or sacrificial at the time, but to William and Sarah, it was the foundation of everything they'd built together. Your son doesn't know how lucky he is, Sarah said one evening as the three of us had dinner on their patio, to have a father who's that generous and supportive. I hadn't told them about Tyler's refusal to help me after the fire. I just said I was staying with William temporarily while dealing with insurance and figuring out my next steps. Tyler's got his own life now, I said diplomatically. Wife, kids, career. It's natural for adult children to become independent. Independent is one thing, William said, but family is family. When my father had his stroke 3 years ago, Sarah and I didn't think twice about having him move in with us until he recovered. How long did he stay? 8 months. And honestly, it was one of the best things that ever happened to our relationship. We got to spend time together as adults, really got to know each other in a way we never had when I was younger. 8 months. William had housed his father for 8 months without complaint, while Tyler couldn't manage to offer me his couch for a single night. The insurance process was moving slowly, which gave me time to think about what I really wanted to do next. The adjuster had confirmed that my house was a total loss, but the payout would be enough to rebuild or buy something comparable. The question was, what kind of life did I want to build? Have you thought about where you want to live? William asked one evening as we sat in his home office, reviewing insurance documents. Not really. I guess I assumed I'd rebuild on the same lot, try to recreate what I had. Is that what you want? To recreate the past? It was a good question. My old house had been full of memories, but many of them were painful. Reminders of my failed marriage, years of loneliness after Tyler grew up and moved away, the gradual realization that my son was pulling away from me. Maybe it's time for something different, I said. What would different look like? I don't know, smaller maybe, easier to maintain. Somewhere I could travel from without worrying about the house sitting empty for weeks at a time. You want to travel? I always thought I would after I retired. See Europe, maybe take a cruise, visit places I'd only read about in books. But when you're tied down to a big house and a yard, it's hard to just pick up and go. William leaned back in his chair, studying me with the same intensity he probably brought to business negotiations. Joshua, can I ask you something personal? Of course. Are you happy? Before the fire, were you happy with your life? The question caught me off guard. When was the last time anyone had asked me about my happiness rather than my health, my finances, or my plans? Honestly, no, I wasn't particularly happy. I was comfortable, financially secure, but not happy. It felt like I was just going through the motions, waiting for something to change. And now everything's changed, whether I wanted it to or not. Maybe that's not entirely a bad thing. You know what I think? William said, leaning forward. I think this fire might be the best thing that ever happened to you. How can you say that? I lost everything. You lost stuff, possessions, furniture, photo albums, but you're discovering what really matters, who shows up when you need them, who treats you with respect, what kind of life you actually want to live. He had a point. The fire had stripped away the illusions I'd been living with. The illusion that Tyler would always be there for me, the illusion that our relationship was based on love rather than obligation, the illusion that financial generosity could substitute for genuine connection. Tyler called while you were at the office today, I said. How's he doing with all this? He's concerned that I'm taking advantage of your generosity. William laughed. Taking advantage? You've barely let me help you with anything. That's what I told him. But I think he's uncomfortable with the idea that someone else stepped up to help me when he wouldn't. Guilt can make people say stupid things. I don't think Tyler feels guilty. I think he feels inconvenienced, like my homelessness is somehow a criticism of his decision not to help. William was quiet for a moment, then asked, what do you want from Tyler? I want my son back. I want the relationship we used to have before he got married and decided I was a burden to be managed. And if that's not possible, if Tyler has made his choice about what kind of relationship he wants with you, then I guess I need to decide what kind of life I want to build without him. That conversation stayed with me for days. The idea that I might need to build a life that didn't revolve around Tyler's approval or involvement was both liberating and terrifying. For 35 years, being Tyler's father had been my primary identity. What was I without that role? The answer came from an unexpected source, William's business. "I've got a proposition for you," William said one morning over coffee. "Harrison Industries is expanding into property management and development consulting. I need someone with your financial background to help structure deals and manage client relationships." "William, I appreciate the thought, but I'm 68 years old. I was planning to retire, not start a new career." "Who says it has to be a full-time career? Work as much or as little as you want, travel when you want to travel, take on projects that interest you, and pass on the ones that don't. You don't need to create a job for me. I'm not creating anything. I legitimately need help with this expansion, and you're legitimately qualified to provide it. The fact that it would give you something meaningful to do while you figure out your next steps is just a bonus." I thought about Tyler's assumption that I should be looking at senior living facilities, planning a life of managed activities and scheduled meals. Then I thought about William's offer: meaningful work, flexible schedule, the opportunity to use my skills and experience in new ways. What would the position involve? Due diligence on potential acquisitions, financial analysis for development projects, client relationship management for our consultant division. Basically, using your 40 years of experience to help me avoid expensive mistakes. And the schedule? Whatever works for you. Some weeks might be full-time if we're closing a big deal. Other weeks might be a few hours of phone calls and email. You have complete flexibility. It sounded too good to be true, but William's track record suggested he didn't make offers he couldn't deliver on. Then I think about it. Take all the time you need. The offer's open whenever you're ready. That evening, I called Tyler to tell him about William's job offer. I thought he might be pleased that I was considering productive work rather than retirement communities. That don't you think you should be slowing down rather than taking on new responsibilities? Why? I'm healthy, experienced, and capable of contributing. Why should I slow down? Because you're 68 years old and you just went through a traumatic experience. Maybe it's time to focus on enjoying your retirement. What if I don't want to retire? What if I want to keep working and contributing? Then that's your choice, I guess. But don't you think working for someone who feels obligated to help you might be complicated? Complicated how? Well, if there are problems or conflicts, how do you address them? You're living in his guest house, potentially working for his company. You're completely dependent on his goodwill. Completely dependent on his goodwill. Tyler made it sound like I was a charity case rather than a qualified professional being offered a legitimate job. William offered me this position because he thinks I can contribute to his business, not because he feels sorry for me. If you say so, Dad. I just think you should be careful about mixing business and personal relationships. The way we mix family and financial relationships. There's difference. How is it different? Because I'm your son. Family relationships are inherently complicated, but business relationships based on mutual respect aren't. Tyler sighed. Dad, I'm just trying to look out for your best interests. Are you? Or are you trying to make sure I don't become too independent? What's that supposed to mean? It means that maybe you're more comfortable with me being dependent and needy than you are with me being successful and self-sufficient. That's ridiculous. Is it? When I was homeless and desperate, you offered me a hotel room and senior living brochures. Now that I'm housed and being offered meaningful work, you're warning me about the complications? It seems like you prefer me struggling. I don't prefer you struggling, Dad. I just want you to be realistic about your situation. My situation is that I'm 68 years old, healthy, financially stable, and being offered an opportunity to use my skills in new ways. What's unrealistic about that? Nothing, I guess. I just worry that you're not thinking clearly about the long-term implications. Long-term implications. Tyler was still thinking about ways to manage my future rather than supporting my present choices. Tyler, I'm going to take the job with William. I'm also going to start looking for a new place to live, something smaller and more manageable. And I'm going to build a life that makes me happy rather than one that meets other people's expectations or what a 68-year-old man should be doing. What about staying close to family? What family? You've made it clear that my presence in your life needs to be carefully managed and limited. William and Sarah have made me feel more welcome in 2 months than you've made me feel in 2 years. Dan, that's not fair. You know what's not fair? A son who spends so much energy pushing his father away that he can't see how much love he's rejecting. I hung up before Tyler could respond. For the first time in our relationship, I'd ended a conversation on my terms rather than accepting whatever crumbs of attention he was willing to offer. The next morning, I accepted William's job offer and started looking for a condo in downtown Atlanta. Something modern, low maintenance with the concierge and security so I could travel without worry. The kind of place where I could build a new life based on what I wanted rather than what other people thought I should want. You seem different, Sarah observed during dinner that weekend. More confident, more yourself. I feel different, like I'm finally making decisions for myself instead of trying to please everyone else. Tyler's not happy about it? William asked. Tyler thinks I should be settling into a quiet retirement, not starting new adventures. He's worried that I'm not being realistic about my limitations. What limitations? Sarah laughed. You're one of the sharpest men I've ever met. Why should you limit yourself just because you're 68? I told him. Family can be complicated, William said. Sometimes the people who are supposed to support us are the ones who hold us back the most. Why do you think that happens? Fear, usually. They're afraid of change, afraid of losing control, afraid that if you become too independent, you won't need them anymore. Or maybe they're afraid that if you become too happy without them, it'll highlight how little they were actually contributing to your happiness, Sarah added. That possibility had never occurred to me, but it made sense. If I could build a fulfilling life without Tyler's involvement, it would prove that his distance and boundaries hadn't been protecting his family, they'd been protecting his ego. 3 months after the fire, I moved into a beautiful 2-bedroom condo in Midtown Atlanta. It had floor-to-ceiling windows, a modern kitchen, and a view of the city skyline that took my breath away every morning. For the first time in decades, I was living somewhere that felt like me rather than like a museum of my past. The Williams job offer turned into exactly what he promised. Flexible, interesting work that made use of my experience without overwhelming my schedule. I was helping evaluate potential acquisitions, structuring deals, and managing client relationships. It felt good to be valued for my expertise rather than tolerated for my presence. Tyler came to see the new condo 3 weeks after I moved in. He walked through the rooms, examined the view, and made polite comments about the decor. It's very nice, Dad, very modern. Thank you, I'm not like it. It must be expensive. It's what I can afford. And you're happy here? Happier than I've been in years. Tyler nodded, but I could see something troubled in his expression. Dad, can we talk about something? And of course, I've been thinking about what you said on the phone a few months ago. About me pushing you away, making you feel unwelcome. And I think you might be right, not intentionally, but maybe I did create too much distance between us. It was the closest thing to an apology I'd ever heard from Tyler, and part of me wanted to grab onto it and rebuild our relationship immediately. But another part of me, the part that had been learning to value my own needs and happiness, wanted to make sure any reconciliation was genuine. What changed your mind? I asked. Watching you rebuild your life. Seeing how happy you are, how successful you've become with William's company, it made me realize that maybe I was holding you back rather than protecting my family. And now I want to try again. I want to have a real relationship with you, not one based on obligation or guilt or managing each other's expectations. What would that look like? I don't know yet, but maybe we could start with regular dinners. Phone calls that aren't just about logistics, me asking your advice instead of always giving you mine. It wasn't everything I'd hoped for, but it was a beginning. And for the first time in years, it felt like Tyler was approaching our relationship as an adult son rather than a resentful child. I'd like that, I said. But Tyler, I need you to understand something. I'm not the same man I was before the fire. I'm not desperate for your approval anymore, and I'm not willing to accept scraps of attention. If we're going to rebuild our relationship, it has to be because we both genuinely want each other in our lives. I understand, Dad, and I do want you in my life. I want my kids to know their grandfather, and I want to learn from your experience instead of being threatened by it. Then let's try again, but this time, let's build something real. That conversation happened 8 months ago. Tyler and I have been rebuilding our relationship slowly, carefully, with mutual respect rather than obligation. He asks my advice about business decisions, includes me in family activities, and treats me like a valued family member rather than a burden to be managed. Jessica and I are still working on our relationship, but she's made an effort to be more welcoming, and I've made an effort to respect their boundaries without sacrificing my own needs. Most importantly, I've learned that family isn't just about blood relations. William and Sarah have become like family to me, people who value my presence and contributions. I have new friends through work, neighbors in my building who become genuine companions, and a life that feels full and purposeful. The fire that destroyed my house ended up saving my life, not just by getting me out of a burning building, but by showing me what real support looks like and teaching me that I deserve better than the scraps I'd been accepting. Sometimes the worst thing that happens to you leads to the best thing that happens to you. You just have to be brave enough to build something new from the ashes of what you've lost. 9. Life lessons and growth. 2 years after the fire, I was sitting in my downtown condo watching the sunrise over Atlanta's skyline when my phone rang. It was Tyler calling to invite me to Benjamin's 9th birthday party. We're having it at the house this Saturday, he said. Nothing fancy, just family and a few friends. Benjamin specifically asked me to make sure you'd be there. Of course I'll be there. Wouldn't miss it. Great, and Dad? Jessica was wondering if you'd mind helping Benjamin with his science project afterward. He's studying engineering and bridges, and she thought you might enjoy showing him some basics. I'd love to. After we hung up, I thought about how much had changed since that terrible night when Tyler had refused to let me stay in his guest room. We'd rebuilt our relationship slowly and carefully, with both of us learning to see each other as adults, rather than playing the roles of dutiful son and sacrificial father. The process hadn't been easy. There were months of awkward conversations, tentative steps forward and occasional steps backward. Learning to navigate a relationship based on mutual respect rather than obligation. But it was real now in a way it had never been before. You seem content, William observed during one of our weekly dinners. More at peace with yourself. I am. For the first time in my adult life, I feel like I'm living for myself rather than trying to please everyone else. That's what I hoped would happen when I offered you the job, not just the work, but the opportunity to rediscover who you are when you're not defined by other people's expectations. William had been right about the job being exactly what I needed. The work at Harrison Industries had given me purpose and intellectual stimulation while allowing me the flexibility to travel and pursue other interests. Last year, I'd taken a month-long trip to Europe, something I dreamed about for decades but never thought I'd actually do. Sarah and I have been talking, William continued, and we want to make you a partner in the consulting division. William, that's incredibly generous, but it's not generosity, it's business. You brought in more revenue in the past year than any other member of our team. You've earned this. The partnership offer was tempting, not just financially, but professionally. To become a business partner at 70 felt like validation that my skills and experience still had value in the marketplace. What would partnership mean in practical terms? Equity stake in the consulting division, share of profits, input on major decisions, plus it would formalize your role and give you security if anything happens to me. Nothing's going to happen to you, 46 years old and in perfect health. Famous last words, William laughed. But seriously, I want to make sure you're protected and that your contributions are properly recognized. I accepted the partnership offer, and it proved to be one of the best decisions I'd ever made. Not just financially, though the income was substantial, but personally. Being valued as a business partner rather than tolerated as a family obligation was a reminder that I had worth beyond my role as Tyler's father. The biggest lesson I'd learned from the fire and its aftermath was about the difference between real family and obligatory family. Tyler and I were slowly building something real, but it had required both of us to let go of the roles we'd been playing and start treating each other as complete human beings. Dad, Tyler said during one of our regular dinner conversations, I owe you an apology. For what? For taking you for granted all those years. For treating your generosity like an obligation rather than a gift. For thinking that setting boundaries meant pushing you away. You don't need to apologize for growing up and becoming independent. But I do need to apologize for confusing independence with rejection. I was so afraid of being dependent on you that I went too far in the other direction. What changed your mind? Watching you thrive after the fire, seeing how happy you became when you stopped trying to please me and started living for yourself. It made me realize that our relationship had become unhealthy for both of us. Tyler was right. Our relationship had been unhealthy, me giving endlessly and him taking grudgingly. Both of us playing roles that didn't fit who we really were. I spent so many years trying to prove I was a good father by giving you everything you wanted, I said. But what you really needed was a father who respected you enough to let you succeed or fail on your own. And I spent so many years trying to prove I was independent by rejecting your help, even when I could have used it. We were both performing instead of just being ourselves. The new version of our relationship was more honest, more equal, and ultimately more satisfying. Tyler asked for my advice when he genuinely wanted it, and I offered help when it was truly needed rather than trying to solve every problem with money. Most importantly, I'd learned that my happiness couldn't depend on Tyler's approval or involvement in my life. He was my son, and I loved him, but I was a complete person with or without his validation. You know what I've realized? I told Dr. Patricia Williams, the therapist I started seeing after the fire, I spent 30 years trying to be the father I wished I'd had, but I never asked Tyler what kind of father he actually wanted. What do you think he wanted? Someone who was present without being intrusive, someone who supported him without trying to control him, someone who treated him like an adult rather than a child who needed constant help. And now I try to be the father he needs rather than the father I think I should be. The therapy had been crucial to my growth after the fire. Dr. Williams helped me understand that my pattern of giving endlessly wasn't actually generosity. It was a form of control, a way of making myself indispensable to avoid being abandoned. When you give someone everything they want before they ask for it, she explained, you're not being generous. You're trying to create dependency. Real generosity means respecting someone enough to let them ask for help when they need it. She was right. I had been so afraid of Tyler not needing me that I'd tried to make myself essential through constant financial support. But that strategy had backfired. Instead of making Tyler grateful, it had made him resentful of my involvement in his life. The fire had forced me to confront the difference between being needed and being wanted. Tyler had made it clear that he didn't need me, at least not in the way I'd been trying to provide, but the people who'd shown up to help me, William, Sarah, even some neighbors and colleagues, had done so because they wanted to, not because they felt obligated. True friendship, I learned, is when someone helps you not because they owe you something, but because they care about your well-being. William had taught me that lesson by example. His help after the fire wasn't repayment for an old debt. It was genuine concern for a friend in need. The fact that I'd helped him 16 years earlier was relevant, but it wasn't the primary motivation for his kindness. I've been thinking about what you said that night at the hotel. William told me recently about how success creates an obligation to help others. What about it? I think you had it backwards. Success doesn't create an obligation to help others. Helping others is what creates success, real success. How so? Look at your life now compared to before the fire. You're happier, more fulfilled, more connected to people who genuinely care about you. That's because you learned to build relationships based on mutual respect rather than obligation. He was right. The relationships I'd built since the fire, with William and Sarah, with my new colleagues, with neighbors in my building, were based on genuine affection and shared interests rather than duty or guilt. I'd also learned to appreciate the difference between solitude and loneliness. Before the fire, I'd been lonely even when surrounded by family because those relationships felt hollow and performative. Now I enjoyed my own company and valued my independence, but I also had genuine connections with people who enriched my life. The best part of aging, I told my friend Robert during one of our golf games, is finally learning to live for yourself rather than trying to meet everyone else's expectations. It took you long enough, Robert laughed. Some of us figured that out decades ago. Better late than never. At 70, I was more confident, more purposeful, and more content than I'd been at any point in my adult life. I had meaningful work, genuine friendships, a relationship with Tyler that was slowly becoming real rather than obligatory, and the freedom to pursue interests and adventures I deferred for too long. The fire had destroyed my house, but it had also destroyed the illusions that had been holding me back. The illusion that financial generosity could substitute for emotional connection. The illusion that I needed Tyler's approval to be happy. The illusion that aging meant declining rather than evolving. If you hear nothing else from me, remember this. I told a group of men at a community center where I'd been invited to speak about resilience and aging. Your worth isn't determined by how much other people need you. Your happiness isn't dependent on other people's approval. And your best years don't have to be behind you just because you're getting older. But what if your family doesn't support your choices? Asked a man in the audience who looked about my age. And you build a new family, not necessarily instead of your biological family, but in addition to it. Find people who value you for who you are, not what you can do for them. Isn't that selfish? It's not selfish to want to be valued and respected. It's not selfish to insist on relationships that are mutual rather than one-sided. And it's not selfish to prioritize your own happiness after spending decades prioritizing everyone else's. The truth I'd learned from the fire and its aftermath was that real love, whether from family, friends, or romantic partners, had to be freely given to be genuine. When I'd stopped trying to buy Tyler's love with money and attention, he'd eventually chosen to rebuild our relationship on more honest terms. When I'd stopped accepting scraps of attention and started insisting on genuine respect, the people who really cared about me had risen to meet that standard. The people who didn't care enough to treat me well had revealed themselves as obligations rather than relationships worth maintaining. The fire was the worst night of my life, I concluded my talk, but it led to the best 2 years of my life. Sometimes you have to lose everything to discover what really matters. After my talk, a man approached me with tears in his eyes. "Thank you," he said. "I've been feeling like a burden to my children, like I should just accept whatever attention they're willing to give me. But you're right, I deserve better than that." Yes, you do. We all do. Driving home from that community center, I thought about how much my perspective had changed since the fire. I'd gone from being desperate for Tyler's approval to being confident in my own worth. I'd gone from accepting limited relationships to building fulfilling ones. I'd gone from fearing aging to embracing it as an opportunity for growth and new experiences. The fire had taken my house, but it had given me my life back. And at 70 years old, I was just getting started. This morning, like every morning for the past 2 years, I woke up in my downtown condo, made coffee, and stood at my floor-to-ceiling windows, watching Atlanta come alive below me. The view never gets old. The sunrise painting the buildings gold, the early commuters heading to work, the city full of possibilities and second chances. Today is special, though. It's the 2-year anniversary of the fire. And I'm having dinner with Tyler and his family to celebrate not the tragedy, but what grew from its ashes. Grandpa, Benjamin, said when I called him yesterday, "Mom's making your favorite chocolate cake for dinner tonight." "Which one is my favorite?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "The one with peanut butter frosting that you taught her how to make." Jessica learning to make my mother's chocolate cake recipe was one of many small steps she'd taken to rebuild our relationship. It wasn't grand gestures. It was small acts of inclusion, respect, and genuine affection that slowly transformed me from an obligation into family. William called this morning to check in, as he does every few weeks. "How are you feeling about today?" he asked. "Grateful," I said. 2 years ago, I thought the fire was the end of my world. Turns out it was the beginning. "Any regrets?" "About the fire? No. About how long it took me to learn these lessons? Maybe. But then again, maybe I needed to go through all of it to get here." William and Sarah remain two of my closest friends, the family I chose and who chose me back. Last month, they asked me to be godfather to their new baby daughter, an honor that moved me to tears. "You saved our family once," William said when he asked me. "Now we want you to be part of our family forever." The partnership at Harrison Industries has exceeded every expectation. We've expanded into 3 new markets, and I'm traveling more than I ever did when I was younger, consulting on projects in Nashville, Charlotte, and Orlando. Next month, I'm flying to California to evaluate a potential acquisition, something that would have terrified me at 68, but excites me at 70. Tyler and I talk every week now, real conversations about our lives, our hopes, our challenges. He asks my advice on business decisions and listens to my answers. I offer support when he needs it and step back when he doesn't. We've learned to be father and son rather than performing those roles. "Dad," he said during our last conversation, "I need to ask you something." "What's that?" "Are you happy? Really, truly happy?" "Happier than I've ever been." "Why?" "Because I want to make sure I never do anything to jeopardize that again. I want to add to your happiness, not take away from it." "You do add to it, son. Every week, every conversation, every time you include me in your life because you want to, not because you feel like you have to." Compartmentalize, good. Because I want Benjamin and Sophie to grow up knowing that family means showing up for each other, especially when it's difficult. He's right about that. Family means showing up, not just physically, but emotionally, with respect and genuine care rather than duty and obligation. Tonight's dinner will include Tyler, Jessica, Benjamin, Sophie, and their new baby, Emma. Also William and Sarah, who Tyler now considers family too. We've created something that transcends blood relations, a chosen family based on mutual love and respect. "Dad," Sophie said the last time I visited, "tell me again about the night your house burned down." "Why do you want to hear that story, sweetheart?" "Because it's the story of how our family got better." She's right. The fire destroyed my house, but it also destroyed the patterns and expectations that had been slowly killing our family relationships. From those ashes, we built something stronger, more honest, more loving. I think about the man I was before the fire, desperate for Tyler's approval, accepting scraps of attention, trying to buy love with money, afraid of aging and change. That man was comfortable but not happy, secure but not fulfilled. The man I am now is confident in his own worth, surrounded by people who choose to be in his life, excited about the future rather than clinging to the past. I'm 70 years old and I feel like I'm just hitting my stride. If this story hit home with you, I want you to remember something. You don't have to accept relationships that diminish you, even if they're with family. You don't have to apologize for wanting to be valued and respected. You don't have to shrink yourself to make other people comfortable, and you're never too old to start over, to build something better from the ruins of what came before. Blood makes you related, but respect makes you family. Don't settle for one without the other. Share your own experience in the comments if you've ever had to rebuild relationships or start over later in life. Tell a brother who needs to hear that it's never too late to demand better, to choose happiness over obligation, to build real family instead of settling for fake family. This is his stories, where men find the courage to tell their truth and the strength to build better endings. The sun is setting over Atlanta now, painting my windows gold and orange. Time to head to Tyler's house for dinner, not because I have to, but because I want to. Because I'm invited, not obligated. Because I'm family, not a burden. And you know what? That makes all the difference in the world.